need to ask ourselves to what extent is RDI and competitiveness of South African business linked, and how we need to actually increase investment in RDI to become more competitive. We also had a presentation on incentives, and I'd like my panelists to also just reflect on that. Have they, in their various sectors, found incentives to be useful? Is there sufficient interaction between the public and private sector to ensure that incentives are targeted towards what the private sector actually needs to release investment? And how can we work more closely together and collaborate a bit better to ensure that private sector investment increases while the public sector facilitates and enables that? I think one of the speakers also talked about bureaucracy and red tape, and we often find that. We find that we have good incentives, but they're difficult. The processes to access them are such that people just eventually say it's not worth our while. So I think just some thoughts on that. James will talk to energy, and obviously energy, we at a point now, and Chippy is in the audience, and I'm sure he can excuse the pun, chip in a bit later. We obviously doing a lot of work on energy in our transition, and Shamila is here from NBI as well. In our transition to cleaner forms of energy, we're looking at a lot of innovations on, and can talk to that. Mining, we haven't had mining exploration in this country for decades. And that must impact on RDI, and maybe they can talk about that and see what we can do about that. On manufacturing, I mean, we've had low economic income. Many of our manufacturing sectors are not competitive enough compared to some of our competitors, and let's talk to that, and that's going to be on video. And then on agriculture, again, one of the speakers said that lots of work being done on digital technologies and other forms of innovation, and perhaps we can talk about that as well. So I just wanted to, by way of introduction, say that that's what we want to try and achieve. I'm very happy that none of my panelists have slides. I believe that panels and slides just don't work. We want to have a conversation. I'd like each panelist to sort of spend 10 minutes or so, and then let's have a roundup, and then let's open it up for discussion so that we have good interaction. I want to start with the video. Dr. Malika Kodjo-Moller from Toyota Vessels Institute for Manufacturing Studies and University of Pretoria had a family problem, so she has been kind enough to put her thoughts down on video, and we'll play that video first, and then I'll go to James after that.
I had hands-on from both sides how actually businesses perceive the current environment for research and development for innovation in South Africa, which is, both challenging, as I mentioned, and promising. What there are, we have noticed there is infrastructure and, a bit of bureaucratic hurdles, and there is also growing recognition of the importance of innovation for competitiveness and sustainability. Therefore, we see many businesses see this, research and development and innovation as essential for addressing market demands, adapting to technological changes which have seen the last few years, and achieving long-term growth. So it's a key element for advancing businesses, especially in a manufacturing setup, regardless the sector. Actually, businesses, are leveraging R&D and innovation, to tackle a lot of urgencies and priorities, as mentioned, across many sectors in the manufacturing setup, whether it is mining or energy or agriculture. For instance, in agriculture, research and development helps optimize, crop yield and develop resilient farming practices, in the face of the climate change we have been noticing. And then as well, what I actually have experienced in the recent year working in consulting as well, that technological advancement have been used in agriculture to advance the field and make it more efficient and more productive. And for instance, in manufacturing, for a particular R&D drives process efficiencies and product quality enhancements, like mining and energy. We see that research, development, and innovation is pivotal for sustainable resources and extraction of and renewable energy integration, respectively. And actually, I want to note again, we have seen more of these, practices of, along with the technological advancement, and as well being from a background of material science at the Material Science and Metallurgical Engineering at the University of Pretoria, we actually have been experiencing, a big drive for research and development. However, as you mentioned, even though there is promises and opportunities, there is also a lot of challenges that companies trying to tackle. So even though they want to stay up to date, implementing R&Ds as a priority in their businesses, there is a lot of hurdles that they're experiencing in South Africa based on, as I mentioned earlier, lack of infrastructure, a lot of, regulatory problems and challenges. So that's how I see it. I believe, R&D incentive that businesses want to see within South Africa to be more competitive and gain competitive edge, whether locally and even internationally, especially for companies that export goods or deals with, overseas, is actually that's the desire that businesses in South Africa, from this incentive point of view, that have a long-term investment in innovation while addressing immediate financial constraints. And that's what I mentioned in the previous question, that they want to stay up to date to what's happening with the technological trend, with what's happening in manufacturing and stuff. But they also like battling with day-to-day problem and challenges, which, I believe the pillar of this is the financial constraints. And these incentives could include, tax credits for R&D's expenditure and grants for collaborative research and projects, streamlined regulatory processes, maybe enhanced access to research infrastructure and talent pools. However, businesses as well seek policies that foster collaboration between academia, government, and industry to maximize the impact for R&D initiative. And again, I speak from experience being in pure research and academic research and development is I have noticed that a lot of companies and academia itself work in silos. They don't work together because as well, the money is too little to share. So if the company is investing in R&D, they want to do it for themselves and maximize from that R&D. They are not getting much from the government. So that's why long-term investment in innovation by the government will actually, enhance collaborative between academia, private sector, academia, and the government. I would say there is, a relationship between the private sector and academia, but it is very, very small portion. And in the past 5 years, actually, we have noticed a huge reduction in the incentive for R&D from grant perspective, from investment from the private sector in academia for collaborative research. And then within private companies by themselves, there is a lot of cutoffs in budgets for R&D, even though I believe it's the pillar for the company to move forward and stay up to date with the technology, with trends, not necessarily just from technology perspective, but from a business model point of view, to stay competitive, and then as well look for new avenues, because the business model changes and we need to change with that, but with making a business sense. This is what I think we always talk about. It's like if you want to improve the what you call quality of life and the communities, and increase employment intakes, you need to actually increase your manufacturing outputs. And in order to increase your manufacturing output for economic growth, which actually tackle all these aspects that you mentioned, from poverties, economic growth, and so on, you need to actually do research and development, and also look for innovative practices from a technological point of view, from a business point of view, from a strategy point of view, from a frame point of view. Also work with the government on the policies that will enhance the manufacturing sector, which will enable supply chain actually to cater for the market demand, not on a national perspective, but on an international perspective. And we also we have seen how the sector in manufacturing, regardless the discipline, has suffered because of COVID-19, because there was a lot of constraints on supply chain, and localization was a drive after that, because we needed to be sustainable to sustain ourselves when we have external factors that are affecting our manufacturing output. So I believe if we increase our manufacturing output, improve our processes through R&Ds, making better products, new products, keeping up with the trend, optimizing our practices, being more efficient, more product, which actually enable us to open more business avenue and hire more people, upskill people as well. And that actually will drive to make our communities better and work our economy as a whole better. So I think in a sentence is increasing our manufacturing output by doing research and development and innovation to optimize, be more productive, reduce cost, be more efficient, will solve a lot of social problem that actually labor speak about, companies complain about. But I think it is a collaborative work that parties need to work together in order to enable economic growth through the manufacturing sector. And we have seen actually the manufacturing sector in certain areas the output has been decreasing a lot. And then in some other sector, we have seen the manufacturing sector output is increasing, which actually led to more job opportunities, to upskill people, especially the one that adopted technological advancements like the 4IR industries, like industrial Internet of Things, like automation, digitization, additive manufacturing, namely 3D printing, simulation, AI, VR. So these ones as well helped enhance some of the sectors and enable them to actually intake more people and increase more employment. So I think, increasing manufacturing output will help tackle a lot of social problem and economical problem, but that can only be done if we maximize our research and development and innovation to be innovative from an operational point of view, from a business point of view, managerial point of view, and for the organization as a whole.
That's from our panelists from manufacturing. I'm going to ask James to come in. James is CEO of the Energy Council of South Africa. So let's start with energy. And James, over to you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Kaz. Morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. See, we've got an open chair, so Kaz can't keep tight rein on the panelists, yeah? This is a very big topic, so I'll try to touch on a number of things, make some big statements, but I'm not a politician. I don't need votes, but I'm very happy afterwards to engage with anyone who would like to kind of dig into the details. So I think just reflecting on the topic, Kaz, of investor confidence, we've been engaging recently was actually with the chief economist of one of the big commercial banks. So business confidence index is at a near historic low level. But if we look at that on the back of load shedding, the energy crisis, I think a huge collapse in our supply chains and transport and Transnet specifically last year, And then I think we kind of forget a little bit the legacy of state capture, the hollowing out of skills, capacity, and capability in key government institutions. And we're seeing this on the ground. If we look at just in the energy space, NERSA, the IPP office, the DMRE sort of structures and teams, ESCOM, these are capacities and capabilities that are needed, and we can't bypass them. That's not an option. We have to work with them. And I think that's where, the first point of the inflection point of confidence has been the Business for South Africa partnership with government, which really sort of started sort of early of last year. Has really made huge strides. We've never seen sort of this level of engagement and collaboration, I think, between business and government, and it really is making a big difference. So I'll go out on a limb and specifically talk about the energy crisis, and I think the upside is, interestingly, first I'll just say that the view was that actually business is not in bad shape financially. They're sitting on cash reserves, they are profitable, but the confidence index is so low, the money's just not being deployed. So we're not seeing the investment. But if we saw a turnaround in the confidence and the ability to deploy money, there are reserves in the South African economy that can be moved quite quickly. So a huge thing that we have to be able to mobilize through this partnership is business confidence and to mobilize investment decisions. So I think from an energy perspective, really what we are seeing is that 2024 will be our load shedding inflection point. We have, for the first time, been able to create a holistic view of what are all sources of generation. So we're seeing the EAF stabilizing in power station. There's a very detailed power station turnaround plan with a lot of actions in there that's openly and transparently being engaged on in the partnership. That combined with a very rapid increase in private sector investment in renewables, we are seeing that despite stabilization only of EAF, load shedding is coming down significantly. The modeling and scenario plans that we are currently jointly working on, and was also recently released in the media, indicates a 50% reduction on load shedding from last year to this year, and pretty much eliminating load shedding, so really down to intermittent stage 1 by next year. So that's the target that is jointly being worked on. So I think that's the first huge message into business that says we can solve load shedding. There's still a lot of work to do. The system will be unreliable, so we mustn't try and kind of predict these things on a day-to-day basis. But the trend is very clear. The numbers are very clear. We're moving in the right direction. And I think similarly on Transnet, we're seeing sort of the green shoots in the supply chains and logistics side. So when we kind of then move a little bit back into the innovation space, certainly I think we've got to recognize that the energy transition is happening. I think that the ERA amendment bill is on track. It's going through Parliament. This is going to be one of these watershed moments similar to lifting of the cap on private sector investment in renewables that shifts South Africa into an energy multi-market model. All industrial economies have already done this, including all the BRICS economies, so we're actually very behind our global peers, and we've got to accelerate. When that happens, I think it is a very significant message to all investors that this is the direction that we're going, and that South Africa is very much now committed towards an energy transition pathway in line with our global commitments towards net zero and our climate legislation towards our NDCs and decarbonizing our economy. So the energy transition is happening. We're seeing the rate of private sector investment in renewables. I think this year our numbers, we will connect 3,500 to 4,500 megawatts private sector investment, wind and solar, onto the grid, and next year could exceed 6,000 megawatts. So that's upwards of 100 billion rand of capital investment per year, which is already being mobilized in the system by private sector investment. So from an innovation perspective, the opportunity is there. This is a technology disruption. We're not being forced by the global north or by climate change to do this. It makes sense. It is the pathway we're adopting, and the government is backing it despite the often mixed messages. There's huge investment that's coming, and it is a technology disruption that we've got to get our heads around. It's very decentralized, very digitized, new models, and some of the things that you spoke about, Kaz, complete digital future of how we consume energy, move energy, measure energy, and even pay for energy. So maybe the last point I would just make is when I actually look at the opportunity, the question I often have at a much more kind of on the ground level, and I thought the discussions this morning were hugely insightful. I'm very sort of optimistic about the approach and the areas of innovation. I just reflect from a very personal perspective, and I have a number of young associates in the Energy Council, and we have a partnership with the Yes for Youth Foundation. There is a bit of a mindset that says, innovation is about having a PhD, and it's all about, I've got to do more courses, and it's about what I know, and it's about my qualifications. And I think we've got to recognize that there's a huge opportunity for innovation to be about what can you do? How can we influence people to make decisions? And it can be small, incremental decisions. Where are there gaps in the market? Where is there an unmet need? How is demand going to shift? How can I influence someone, even at a small scale, in the sort of the informal economy, in the township economy, to be innovative around addressing those demand and that need, make decisions? There is a huge opportunity, a huge amount of investment and momentum in that space already. But I do feel often that we're not achieving speed and scale in investment decisions. And this is partly often, and I have these conversations with my associates all the time and saying, stop worrying about what you know. You're all very clever, you're all grads, and you're all wanting to go and do more and more and more qualifications. Start focusing your career on what you can do, who you can influence to make a decision, because that's what's going to move the needle, and that's what's going to bring you success. And I feel that that part of the innovation conversation maybe is something which we could engage more on. But the opportunity and the money in the investment pipeline is there without a doubt. I think there's lots of exciting opportunity that we can go after. But it's our ability to create speed and scale on getting those investment decisions done, I feel is something we've got to think about quite hard. Thanks, Kaz.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks very much. Sitzer from the Merrill, from the Old from the Minerals Council of South Africa, just on mining and resources.
Is this, yeah, it's working. Well, good morning, everybody. Very nice to be here. I think what Kaz and James have both done in their input is explain very well that we're operating in a high-risk environment. And innovation by its very nature is also a high-risk activity. So what we're seeing in our sector, we've done a study together with our modernization partners, Rees. Lita, maybe you could just stand up as the representative here today. So we did a study with them on the strength of our innovation ecosystem. And the conclusion that came out of there is that we're seeing a lot more collaboration happening. And this is not only collaboration between mining companies, but also with government and science councils and higher education institutions as well. And I think it's part of sharing the risk, that not everybody takes the same risk. So we are very proud partners together with the Department of Science and Innovation and the Mandela Mining Precinct. We understand this to be the largest public-private partnership on research, development and innovation at the moment. So we're very proud to be part of that. So that is the one partnership. And then we've just concluded another partnership with the HSRC, who's going to assist us in understanding exactly what research, development, innovation, investment is being made in the mining sector, and better understand what levers need to be pulled to improve on that. Just in terms of the environment that we're currently operating beyond the South African environment, we've got a serious drop in commodity prices over the last period. Now, mining companies, by their very nature, are typically price takers. So they can't pass on the price to customers and so on. So if your costs continue to go up by 10% per annum, and your price is set by somebody else, the only way out is through innovation. That is to get to the results. So that is one big factor at the moment. And the other thing is about what is happening globally in the innovation space. there's just an example I want to mention. To make fiberglass, you need a particular mix of platinum group metals. And one of these metals, is called rhodium, for those of you who are into the periodic table, was at a record high price. And the price absolutely collapsed. And part of the reason for that collapse is that the Chinese have, through innovation, have found a way to actually change the formula that is necessary to make the fiberglass. And that had a massive impact on our, our platinum group metal industry. So those things are influencing us. What happens in other countries absolutely matter. In terms of the dynamics on innovation, I mean, we've got this wonderful opportunity on the just energy transition that lies ahead. It's expected that demand for what is called by some critical minerals will go up by 5 times by 2050, which is a wonderful problem to actually have. But the challenge with mining is that the deeper it goes, the more the cost increase and the lower the productivity. And it's not because people are just working less. It's because to get to your workplace, you have to travel further. I mean, can you imagine every year your distance from your home to your office just increases? You've just got to travel further. So those are the economic dynamics of mining. And I mean, in South Africa, we have the 8 out of the 10 deepest mines in the world. So we're actually doing fantastic in terms of innovating on the economic side. On the environmental side, copper, which is something we all use in our daily lives, to make 1 ton of copper, you need 1 ton of water. And you will release or emit about 2 to 3 tons of greenhouse gases. Now that, of course, in an environmental conscious world, it is just not going to work. So it's expected that innovation can actually reduce these quantities by 30 to 50%. So there's massive, massive opportunities for us in this space. But we have to also be very socially conscious. You know, with the unemployment rates that we have in South Africa, we cannot just as a mining industry decide tomorrow we're going to automate all our operations. That's just not going to be the right thing to do. So all these things play into the innovation space and presents lots of opportunities. So what is it that government can actually help us with in this regard? I think last year when the 11D tax incentive was extended, we really welcomed that. We welcomed the simplification of the approval processes and inclusion of business processes could be considered. The challenge is still that it is not a globally competitive, incentives. In terms of the size matters there, and then the other thing is that it's a tax incentive. So if you want to stimulate the startup sector and small businesses to actually do more research, development, innovation, which they can sell to bigger entities, they may not be profitable at this point in time. So that is something that needs to be looked at. If I can just be blunt about some of the existing incentives on, for instance, the THRIP, with all its good intentions, it's basically given up on that. Same with the SPY one. There's very little appetite. The processes that one has to go through to get those incentives are just huge deterrents for the value that you get at the end of the day. In terms of a serious ramp up of innovation making a difference for us, we think that it's very important that we focus on commercialization. We've seen the wonderful impact that it had when government started incentivizing publications. We saw a more than 600% increase in publications, which is commendable. But we need solutions. Publications, unfortunately, cannot mine. Publications can't get the gold out of the ground and the other minerals as well. So we need those solutions that is going to make it more economic, more environmentally friendly, and socially conscious. So we think we need to look at how can we incentivize solutions. Look at what other countries are doing, making the patent system supportive. So we need to look at how we can support business in that regard. And just as a cultural issue, that one builds that culture of satisfaction to say we want a solution to a problem. Publication is not going to do that. So, Kaz, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much. Those are my input. Thank you.
Dr. Ronald Heath from Forestry South Africa.
Thank you, Kaz, and thank you to the organizing institutions for giving me this opportunity. So I'm first going to give you a bit of a background of our sector, because I think it's quite important to understand that before you can understand the impact of R&D on our sector and how we approach it. So the forestry sector is quite small. We're 1% of the national GDP. But quite interesting, we're about 24% of agri GDP and 26% of the jobs in the agriculture sector. So I think the small sector, we perform extremely well. We're a very diverse sector as well. Not just on scale, we've got 13 corporates in the country. 2 of them are multinationals. We've got 1,300 timber farmers, and then we've got about 20,000 small timber growers, which is amazing to say also 75% of those are black women as well. So we're not just in race diverse, not in scale, but also in management objectives. So we've got 3 different genera we plant, but within those genera we've got a number of management objectives, from saw timber to pulpwood to paper to a number of products that gets produced from our landholdings. And that makes it a very challenging sector to please or to address through research, specifically due to that diversity. So the approach our sector has taken is firstly to put structures in place. We've got a sector research advisory body that's representative of the entire sector. And how we approach our research and our research funding is completely collectively. So the research we do needs to address all growers in the country. So we've basically identified 3 areas of research. Our research needs to reduce our input costs. It needs to increase productivity. And lastly, it needs to protect our growing stock. And within that, of course, there's a whole suite of research areas or priorities we need to address those 3 overarching criteria. And in doing so, we do address the research needs of all our growers, be it the multinationals or be it the small growers. We also are very keen on the partnership approach, and I found that survey quite interesting as it was popping up. The 2 biggest ones that drew my attention was where we focus on as an industry. It's partnerships with government and partnerships with academia. That is a model we've been using for years. Working through academia is not just less expensive because of the use of students, but we continuously align our biggest, newest technologies with our curriculum in teaching students in universities. So we look at capacity building, and the capacity we're getting out of that is the best capacity we can get. And then also with government partnering with us, that is a model to use. I think how that model is implemented has changed a bit, and I think how we try and manage it has not changed. And my fellow panelists also alluded to that, and is how it's being measured, what's being done, and also how universities are being supported by government. Articles and getting subsidies for articles is not the way to do it anymore. We need impact research, and pushing out articles is not impact. We need solving problems that we need solving. By all means, there's a need for a balance between blue sky research or basic research and applied, but articles is not the measure anymore, I think, for private sector to see where we're going. We want to see results that we can take to the field, we implement to make our business more sustainable and more competitive. Also, although we've tried to be responsible and protect each other, legislation like the IP Act has made it very difficult once you start working with universities. We kind of start paying twice for our investments. We'll pay to get the work done. The IP sits in, later we've got to pay to actually implement it again. So although that is a very responsible act, I think this might need to actually start relooking at how we implement it, what the purpose of IP Act is, and how it is currently affecting our research production and outputs, and how it's making it quite sometimes an administrative hurdle when we start implementing research. I'm also thinking one of our challenges we've recently now experienced is with working with higher education institutions, because the pressure the institutions are under, they are looking at where can they make money. So if we go to university and we commission any research, there's a 25% overhead charge, or they call it a research admin charge, depending on the university you work with. With an admin of overhead of like that, it's almost, for us, easier to go to a private institution who's working with exactly the same overheads. And that's making that model not as attractive. So I think the support that needs to go into higher education institutions, on teaching side as both as on the research side, also needs to be relooked. That universities need to become more stable. I had a meeting with one of our universities a while back, and they confirmed that, to their knowledge, they were the last university that slipped from black into the red. All our universities are working negatively financially. They're under pressure. Is that sustainable for us to look at the research capacity we have? That's where a majority of our research capacity sits, is in universities. So we need to start looking after that resource very carefully going forward. I think looking at some of the incentives that we've seen in increasing our investment, and for all means, I think both my fellow panelists alluded to that as well, is we're in business. If business is difficult, the first area that gets cut is research and development, unfortunately. And that graph showed it. 2008 economic global crisis, investment dropped. Now again with COVID, industry was taking a hit, investment's dropping. So it's a tough business to be in. But we're still maintaining our research, and I'm in a sector, I'm very privileged to say I work for a sector that is currently investing 1.62% of their GDP into research. Unfortunately, 80% of that's industry funding. We're lacking the other side, we're lacking the government to come to the party. But those partnerships is definitely what helps. So some of the incentives we've seen is government funding coming towards us. And that's incentive because for the first time you see both parties having skin in the game. It's a co-funding model that works. Specifically, I can refer to the Sector Innovation Fund, where we're also partnering with DSI. That's our biggest source of government funding, and it's been really a game changer for us over the last 9 years. It's an amazing program, but there's an incentive to actually invest because government's walking that path with you. And of course, it's challenging sometimes to balance the imperatives that government would like to seek and what industry would like to seek, but it works. It is unfortunate that these cannot go outside of an MTF. And I think government needs to relook at that urgently. Research in our sector, we're probably the industry with the longest investment horizon. If we want to deploy a new tree that addresses climate change or a new insect or new growing conditions, it takes us 15 to 20 years from start to deployment. We can't work on 3-year research horizons. Industry is looking at increasing their investment horizon on research, looking at a long-term investment. We've got research programs that's celebrating their 25th anniversary this year. Those long-term agreements is what you need. And we need government to consider entering into some of these long-term agreements. We've seen some of them, the Centers of Excellence, excellent example. And I think they've got quite fruitful. The one that our sector received was amazing, was a game changer. Because there was sustainability, there was long-term planning. We just now learned a few months back that we've lost our Center of Excellence, they're closing down. Because of that, our institution will not take in any students in 2024. Because it's now suddenly, what do? We've lost long-term funding. There's no certainty, there's no security. We need to relook at that system and start looking at long-term partnerships, long-term commitment from all involved, so that research addresses long-term issues. We've heard about the just transition, we've heard about climate change. Climate change is coming, we know that, it's happening. How do you address something so big, so long-term, on such a short research agenda? So we need to relook at that critically. Some of the other incentives that's worked, that we thought would be quite excellent, was, for example, the tax incentive, which we've also spoken about. And that is a wonderful system. I can say with our member base, we've had little uptake. And not because they don't need it, we definitely need it, but it's an administrative burden. And there's a lot of inconsistencies and uncertainties and insurities. And I think that might lead to another point I'll bring this now, but it's interdepartmental collaboration needs to improve. And the tax incentive is a good one. We work very closely with DSI, and you get your pre-approvals, and the moment you go to SARS, you run into a brick wall. Because the two of them aren't aligned. One's talking money, one's talking impact. Governments need to work close on these initiatives to work together. And I think that is a common trend we should see in research investment and going forward, is collaboration. Not just between industry and academia and government, but between government departments themselves. And I think the decadal plan and the white paper, as the opening speaker mentioned, I think that will change it, where DGs next sitting talking to each other and an interministerial committee. That hopefully will change it, but we need to see much closer collaboration between departments. Not just to align themselves, but also I think to learn from each other. And a good opportunity, an example once again, and I'm also going to mention that nasty word, THRIP. It was an amazing model, an initiative. Our industry benefited significantly from it, and it changed the model completely. And when it changed initially, we were quite excited working with industry. And at that stage, we were in our second cycle of the Sector Innovation Fund, which works exactly the same model, the work with industry associations, not with the research partners. But that whole initiative has now been implemented in a way that nobody can actually work with it. It's not a feasible program anymore. It's to the point where our researchers, we promoted with them, they refused to apply for THRIP funding. And when we met with the department in the first workshop when DTIC changed that whole model, we actually recommended they meet with DSI and go learn from the Sector Innovation Fund, because it's an easy model, it works, and it's impactful. Yet they went a different route. And it's now a research model that is not making the impact it should in the country. And there are millions and millions of rands sitting there not being utilized like we should. But those departments could have learned from each other. And I think departments need to start talking to each other very, very closely going forward. I also think for our sector, what we've realized is multidisciplinary research is, I think, now an old word. We've gone to now multi-institutional research, where we've got little capacity. Our first speaker mentioned there's not enough for everybody to go around. You need to start being innovative and creative how we use our research money that's available. So once again, the Sector Innovation Fund has enabled us to do that, is to force our research partners from different institutions into projects. And it's having an immense impact on what we do. We just had our first review of our progress. And it's amazing what that has actually happened by forcing institutions together. And along with that, what we've also realized is forestry is a very unique sector, unique challenges, but we do have synergies with other commodities. And we need to start looking at how do other commodities collaborate and work together on research. So we've started building bridges with some of the agricultural commodities. It has made an impact. The leverage we're getting out of it is amazing. But we need to work on systems to better drive that forward, where commodities can actually start working together or cross-sectoral. We've heard a lot of the challenges we've heard is that there is that problem. And then lastly, I think, what would industry need to see happen to start increasing their investment? And I think the first two presenters next to me made it very clear. We need an environment that is investor-friendly. Business makes money. If we don't make money, we can't invest. Infrastructure is a big problem. Unfortunately, those are things that are in our control. Unfortunately, there are market drivers not in our control. We're sitting at the moment where 45% of our medium saw timber companies are sawing timber 100 rand under cost price per ton. So they're making a loss every day. The larger sawmilling companies are cutting 300 rand under cost price per ton because the markets are just depressed. Kay has referred to that the construction industry is taking a knock, then we take a knock. Those are things that we need to look at, see what we can do as a country to improve the investor confidence through the Transnets, the Escoms and all those. I think I'll also share the confidence that was mentioned. I think it's improving, we're seeing things happening. But in addition to that, we also need to be very cognizant of prohibitive or inhibitive legislation. It's something that's been discussed at a lot of levels. It's being discussed at the PPGI level. We're seeing too many legislation that ends up in court with industry having to fight government. We're wasting money in court, and while we're doing that, we're seeing investment slow down. Private sector, if there's any uncertainty, will not invest. And we need to collectively look at how we take care of the private sector to ensure that the private sector is sustainable and competitive. And once we can get that done, I think we'll see investment into R&D climb significantly, because that is when we see that slip, is when industry slips, R&D slips, and that investment. So that's, I think, on a much higher level, but it's something we need to be cognizant about. I think government is doing a lot trying to increase investment into R&D, but if the private sector can't flourish, it's going to be difficult to get industry to actually take that step forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to throw it open now for about 20 minutes or so, but just before that, just one question from me. There seems to be a common thread here that one, incentives are good and they can work if processes are efficient, if departments talk to each other, and government talks to business. Because too often we have incentives that government develops without talking to business, and then they make no sense to business. So there's obviously a need for greater collaboration between the private sector and the public sector on a whole range of stuff. Some collaboration is happening in the sectoral areas, but just to you guys, what can business do more to actually collaborate in business? So you talked about you have multi-institutional research, but you also need cross-sectional sectoral interventions. There are some areas of government weaknesses or incapacity that cover all the sectors. Are we being effective enough to deal with those if we're dealing with those on a sectoral basis? So is there the possibility of business to coordinate a bit better and to collaborate amongst themselves to be more effective in their collaboration with government? James.
Thanks, Kaz. I think yes, and we are starting to build some confidence in a track record in the engagement and the partnership between business and government. One of the things which is just important to maybe reference or recognize is that if we look at the reform, so both Eskom and Transnet there is no intention of putting those organizations back into the old forms that they used to be in. Eskom will never look like it used to, and neither will Transnet. So the reform is around privatization, decentralization. That is the way that the world is moving. That's why we're moving into an open market sort of environment. So the partnership, I think, must not be positioned as business helping government, because the decentralized market model, which is where the world is moving to, is things get devolved and pushed into the private sector regardless. I think we're in a space that maybe because we had a crisis, we've accelerated the partnership through the transition, and we're now working as business and government to accelerate that transition. But the partnership was going to be there anyway. Private sector ultimately step into a number of these roles and investment. So I think there's a little bit, we've got to move away from, we've got to embrace the partnership between business and government, get on with it, and I think business must be more confident in being bold about what needs to be done, calling out government, and being bold around creating some structure and pushing for action. And I think organizations, there's a lot of responsibility on organizations like BUSA, the Energy Council, and others, to be able to help coordinate that so that we make sure that it's done in a transparent, good governance kind of manner.
Thanks. Ronald?
Yeah, thank you. I think definitely business can do more. I think the first thing that business needs to do is stop the nonsense about competing. Yes, we are competitive, but there are areas where we need each other. And realize that, once you realize that, you can actually sit in the same room and work together. Once again, that is what made our research so impactful in our sector, is there's absolutely no competition. You've got the two biggest companies that will collectively fund a project. 4 years later, we now got 11 partners on that project. But two big guys say, listen, can't compete on this, we need to collaborate. So we need to get past that mindset of we're competing. Some areas we do not compete. Climate change research and impact on the agriculture sector. That's not competitive at all. But why do we have 4 centers of expertise on climate change in the country? We need to pool our resources, and we can only do that once we get past that. And I think the structures are in place. There's a lot of structures. We've got the commodity groups, we've got the associations, industry associations. So everything is there. We just need to actually pull the trigger and start doing it.
Thanks. Sorry, Sid.
Yes, thank you. I think what we need to get better at is identifying and defining our problem, the problem that we want the innovation to solve. I'm just going to give an example here that we had at Mandela Mining Precinct. You must have seen the underground rock drill. This is a piece of equipment that hasn't changed in decades. And one of the first things that the Mandela Mining Precinct did was to get the mining companies together and say, what do you want from a new generation or next generation rock drill? And they put together the criteria and they agree on their criteria and then went out into an open innovation challenge. And today we have a rock drill that is not only much quieter and less vibrating and safer, but it is also more productive. So it ticks all the boxes and all of that, the innovation. And I say the first point of that was the mining companies coming together and say, this is what we want in terms of a future rock drill. Today, there are female rock drillers, which in the past was very difficult. I mean, I would not be able to do that job. But today there are ladies who can operate that machine and do the drilling. So I think this is our key challenge, defining our problem.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, let's open it up to the audience, to the participants. How do you want to manage this? Online or inside first?
Can I be biased to the online for this panel? Thanks. Nicole, can I hand over to you? I think there are a few questions already on the chat that you can say them loud. Then you can come over this side to the room. And also to remind that the poll is currently running behind those that can manage to actually engage with the poll, kindly do that. And also to remind you that the hashtag Innovation South Africa, SESTI, SPF 2024, and private sector RDI when you are posting on different social media. Over to you, Nicole. Thanks.
Okay, Nicole.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thank you. We don't have any questions online yet. I will alert you if there are any questions. Just to reiterate that there is 2 questions in our poll, so please do participate. Thank you.
Sorry, you said there's no questions online. Okay, so we'll wait for you. Are there questions in the room here from anybody? Yeah, okay. Gentleman in front and then just behind you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your practical presentations and on the different sectors, including the companies and so on, and the competitions. I just want to say something. You from South Africa, you have done some extraordinary thing that will not only be helpful to you, but to all of Africa and the world. The reconciliation you did was very, very, very good. Is there any way we could also move that reconciliation to the economic sphere sector? No, sincerely, I'm just sincerely asking you. You know, Norway, when they got oil in 1996, it was little oil. You know what they did? They debated for 1 year. What should we do with the oil? Should we give it to the state? They said no. Should we give it to the companies? No. To the people of Norway? Yes. Now, if you go to Norway, when I get invited there, Mamo, no, you don't pay. We look after you. We are rich. Can you imagine all the people are rich? You have 16 minerals. You have trillions. But do you manage it well? This is serious. I mean, and what I'm just suggesting is the following. Please allow me. If we want to change, we need to know to create social innovation, like you did, reconciliation in the politics sphere, social innovation, social entrepreneurship. Make profit, but at the same time give. Take one, give one. Is there any way you could create this kind of economic system, sustainable economic system, where you have not just innovation, but social innovation? Not just entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship. Not just companies, all right, but also companies that give and take. Is there any chance that you can actually develop a new approach and we develop new indicators and so on this? We really need to be innovative, not just copy or, all these indicators from OECD and all this. No. Oslo and all this. We could create our own from South Africa. Okay. And we have, I'm just sincerely speaking, we have done something extraordinary. We are using your Ubuntu philosophy to create a new university. We call it Osiri University. And I'm now directing the PhD program completely. You will not believe it. South Africa is all over. It's recognized in America. You are recognized in America,
Okay.
you are not recognized here. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you give it to the gentleman behind you, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Terence Liduma from Makamisa Foods. I'm an entrepreneur and also a black industrialist. So my question is, as you're seated in here, deliberating on innovations and sustainability of those and how we can then transform that into value that can benefit the society. As it is, there's about 750 allegedly billion that is sitting in the township economy. And how do we build solutions that will then benefit the communities in different townships? I'm making reference to this because there are other developments around your multinationals, big companies like Woolworths that intend to invest in the township, which potentially will create value and jobs and all of that. But how do we, using science and innovation, make sure that the initiative is transformative in its nature, it benefits local communities, and also create those social entrepreneurs within to create a kind of like a balanced and sustainable ecosystem for those communities to thrive? Thank you.
Thank you. There's one question online.
Thank you. And Nicole, I think there's just one that came after your question.
Yeah, well, there's two, so I'm consolidating, but basically what the question is how we can use partnerships across sectors specifically to address socio-economic challenges.
Sorry, what was that?
How would a public-private partnership address socio-economic challenges?
Okay. Okay, so the first question was a broader one, more reconciliation in the economic sector and social innovation. And then the second one, township economies, how we grow township economies and leverage of the potential that there is there. And then how do partnerships actually grow social development? Who wants to start? James, you've got the mic. Why don't you start?
Great. Completely agree with social innovation. We're going to have to think about that. We can connect over coffee. I think it's excellent. Just on the point of also township economies, I don't know if people have kind of followed G.G. Alcock at all in his book, Economics. I mean, the numbers in that are just unbelievable. You know, it's almost like you start, and we've actually seen some of the big commercial banks giving views of what true unemployment in South Africa is. I also last year attended the Gauteng Renewable Energy Symposium. I was absolutely blown away with the number of young and entrepreneurial people, all young black people out of the sort of township saying, we're doing the following and we need more help and we need access to finance. And so it wasn't demand, it wasn't payment issues. What they needed help with was to grow their business. They already had the business, they already had the demand. And I think this, to maybe the point I would make then, is the energy transition is such an opportunity. But we've got to think of the energy transition as an integrated system that at any given time must be reliable and must be whole. If we lose the history being the historic assets, like the coal stations, we're going to end up in load shedding. If we lose the government of the day, we're going to end up with market failures. But through the transition and through the decentralization, what we are going to see is investment and business opportunities moving into individuals. We see it in the developers sector. The amount of money that's flowing into new startups, new job creation, the farming communities who are making their land available for farms are suddenly have been neglected for years trying to farm a few sheep. Suddenly they're getting money every single year into their bank account for just providing a servitude. So the decentralized and the move away from centralized rent-seeking models of a big state-owned entity is quite profound. And I don't think we've got yet the right political and government models. We need to do a lot of work to make sure that those policies and government models stay whole, stay reliable through the transition. Otherwise, we're going to break the system. But I think it's, again, a huge opportunity. We are seeing the decentralized flow of opportunity and finance and money. But we've got to keep this integrated approach to keep the whole system reliable as we move. think.
Yeah, thank you. I think, firstly, talking about the informal sector, there's a lot of schools of thought on this, and a lot of say they will remain informal, because that's what's making them successful. So that is a difficult one to conceptualize. Some of them do grow. I think looking at how do we get innovation into those informal sectors? Why do you want to? They've got limited resources, yet they're thriving economically. That's probably where most of our innovation is sitting, is in those informal businesses. They are, and I've had the privilege of visiting a few, some of these informal businesses in my last year with my studies, and it's amazing to see how they thrive. So I don't think they need innovation. They're probably more innovative than most of us. But what they do need is the business support to grow, to take them from informal to formal and from small businesses to medium business and grow. And that's business support. I can tell you in our sector, once again, we had the opportunity with land reform, where land beneficiaries would come in, even before they claim the land, we're very proactive. Land claims get settled way in advance. Of the land claims that we've seen in our sector, we're sitting probably about 95% success. Because a corporate's saying, listen, you've got the land, you've got no business experience. We will give you all the business experience over 2 rotations. So that's 2 plantings. You're looking at anything from 12 to 20 years. All the information you need, all the business guidance, teach you the business models, give you the best growing material, the growing genetic stock you can get, all the technical expertise they'll teach you, and they will then also confirm you a market for your timber after rotation at market price. After 2 years, you can opt to go on with this agreement, or you can move out. There we're actually giving the people the business skills, and we're helping them run a business. They've succeeded. And I think that's the gap we have, is taking this forward, is now taking the innovation that's out there, implementing it, but then apply the business skills you need to make that big and successful and impactful for the country's economy and for job creation. I think that's where the gap is now, is actually now building the business side of it, not the innovation.
Yeah, thank you. I think firstly, in terms of the social innovation, I think we can, certainly in our sector, we cannot do a technological innovation on its own. One has to bring in the social innovation. So in the Mandela Mining Precinct, one of the programs is called SATCAP. It's a successful application of technology centered around the people. So you put the people at the center of doing that development. On the local entrepreneurs, every mining company is by law required to have a social and labor plan, in which they have to specify and agree how they're actually going to involve the local community. There's multiple challenges with that, but one of the challenges, it should be informed by the industrial development plan of the local authority. That should inform what is in the social and labor plan. And that is a real challenge, because what mining company often gets from those is a wish list that does not speak to socio-economic development. It is, build a sports ground there, build a clinic there, and so on. So it is not, well coordinated. What is being looked at now is an economic succession approach, where you look much more on a regional basis. And you're saying, well, what is it that we need in the region, whether it's from the just energy transition or whatever the case may be. And you say, okay, let's build that on, so that people don't only have opportunities during the life of the mine, but also succeeding the mine beyond the mine operations. So that is something that is being looked at the moment. And then in terms of the public-private partnership, I think just using the Mandela Mining Precinct as an example, and that's taking small steps, and hopefully that will also grow as time goes along. But at the end of the day, that is all aimed at contributing to making a mining sector that is more globally competitive, not only on the economic matters, but also on environment and social matters. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah, one final question. Very quick question, please.
My question has to do with the panelists' view on adopting a country of origin strategy, and on the flip side of that, what support do we need from insurance companies for your key man insurance and so on in the environment that we're currently finding ourselves in as business? I think those two things are quite critical.
Okay. Let's start with Sitsa. Okay, anybody want to take it?
Shall I just decide?
Ronald, you seem to want to.
Yeah, I think it's challenging if you're talking about insurance. Our sector kind of cringes when you start talking about that. I've got a colleague in the audience that used to work for the insurance industry before he came to forestry. And it's a big challenge. If you look at the risk profile, our risk profile is tremendous. But what's happening, I think, is need to align what the challenges are with facing as a country, as a sector, and aligning that with our insurance companies and insurance issues. We're looking at a risk profile that's going to get worse and worse as we go forward as a sector. We're going to get drier, fires are going to increase, and all the signs show that our pest and disease incidences are going to get worse. Growing conditions are going to get tougher. We just now, 2018, 2017, saw those George fires. The industry hasn't recovered. The economy in those areas, in those provinces, have not recovered. They're still struggling because there's no alignment between our risk profile and what insurance is. And if you look at what insurance will cost our industry, if you want to fully insure or effectively insure, it's impossible. It won't be profitable for us because the risk profile is too high. And it's going to get worse. So it's difficult to say what we need, but I think it's a better alignment. And for us to remain sustainable, I think, through some of these risks and to actually absorb them, it's going to be challenging going forward. So it's a very, very difficult answer to say because we understand they've got their own business as well. And we're looking at risk profile, I think, in general for business is getting worse and the environment's getting challenging. So it's going to be a difficult one.
I just want to touch on another issue which is relevant. And this is with this whole issue of the critical minerals that I mentioned, which are necessary, for the future, whether it's climate change or digital. One of the things in which we think government can really help is by de-risking some of those projects. Like has been mentioned on the forestry side, to get the mine operating takes you anything between 15 and 20 years. And during that time, you're not turning any profit. So we implore government to actually help us and de-risk those, rather than putting measures in place like putting export bans or export taxes and those kind of things, which just adds to uncertainty, that adds to costs, and so on. So that is what we appeal. Our appeal is always to government, is to help us de-risk this. There's massive opportunities, but without support, we're not going to be able to realize them for the country. Thank you.
Okay, James, anything to add?
Just very quickly, from an energy perspective, if I understand the question correctly, I think we are essentially moving from climate mitigation into adaptation. And I think Crispian there was best placed to kind of guide us on that. What I would say in the mitigation space, I think it's very clear. The world is not going to wait for South Africa to kind of catch up. We've got to do it. The global policy shift is very clear. This is a technology disruption. It's going to start with energy, but it's going to move into transport, petrochems, everywhere else. And we have to be globally competitive. There is significant opportunity with it, but I think that we also have to sort of make sure that we, if we have this approach that, we're just going to object, that's not an option because this is a global shift. And the global shift is accelerating the energy transition faster than what any other technology disruption has happened in the past. And there have been many other technology disruptions and even energy transitions in the past. Coal to oil, oil to gas. This transition is being forced at a faster rate. We are not relevant in dictating that pace. But I think when we switch over into adaptation, that's the next frontier. But I'm going to leave that to someone more qualified.
Okay, I'm going to have to round off. Just the question by the gentleman on economic reconciliation. I think that certainly from where I sit in the work some of us are involved in, what's been happening in South Africa is between government and business, we've been throwing bricks at each other, okay? Instead of using those bricks to actually build stuff, we've been throwing it to each other. I think what's happening recently is that, for instance, the partnership that business has with government on energy, logistics, and crime and corruption. Business doesn't have to do that, to be quite honest. We plowed in so far about 800 million bucks into that. We'll plow in more. But besides achieving the objectives we want to achieve, what we're also doing is ensuring that government institutionalize the capacity that is being built so that government can do what it's supposed to do, right? We're using a similar partnership now, and that also goes to the township economy one. Business and government is coming together to look at youth employment, including development of SMEs in townships and how they can employ youth. Not working in our different corners, but coming together and see how projects that are already there can, through a partnership between business and government, be brought up to scale. And I think business in South Africa, in our context, is increasingly beginning to realize, in my view, that the line between business and society is not there anymore, okay? And it's in business's interest. So, you know, whenever I'm in Sandton, I speak to people in Sandton, I say business is very proud of the fact that this is the richest square mile in Africa. Well, a mile from there is the poorest township in South Africa, or one of the poorest townships in South Africa. If business doesn't work with government to address problems there, in 20 years' time, you're not doing business. Simple. Don't need researchers, don't need consultants, don't need any of that, okay? So it's very much in business's interest to ensure that society works. And I think that we're beginning to work in that way, in partnership. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you to the audience.